I never thought I'd say this, but the day I found out my parents stole from me was the day my life finally started moving forward. Not because it didn't hurt, it did, more than I can explain, but because it shattered the last illusion, holding me back. Let me set the scene. It was Christmas Eve. I was coming home to Chicago after a long, exhausting semester of dental school, expecting the usual family chaos, too much food, loud conversations, and maybe, just maybe, a bit of warmth. Instead, I walked into a silent house, no lights, no music, just my grandmother Dorothy, sitting quietly by the window, knitting. She looked up with a small smile, but there was sadness in her eyes. I asked where everyone was. She handed me a note. My heart dropped. It was from my parents. They'd taken my sister, brother, and even my brother's wife on a luxury Christmas cruise, and they'd paid for it with the $8,500 dental loan I'd worked 2 years to save. You know that moment when your brain can't fully process what's happening? I just kept reading the note over and over, like maybe I was misunderstanding. But no, they really wrote it out, almost bragging. "Hope you don't mind we use the loan money, you can catch up later." I sat down across from Grandma, and for the first time I saw it. The weight she'd been carrying too. She'd been left behind just like me. Suddenly, years of small betrayals clicked into place. The times I covered bills because the family needed me, the little guilt trips, the endless pressure to give. I'd excused it as love. But love doesn't steal from you. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind raced with questions. How long had they been taking advantage of me? How much had I lost without even realizing? Could I even face them about it? Or would they just laugh it off like they always did? And most of all, what was I going to do now? I was 28, broke, betrayed, and sitting in a cold house with the only family member who had never asked me for a cent. That was the moment something hardened in me. I wasn't going to let this slide, not this time. I decided right then, I was going to gather every piece of proof, every record, every receipt, and when they walked back through that door, sunburned and smug from their vacation, they were going to answer for everything they'd taken from me, and from Grandma too. But here's what you should know, I wasn't just angry about the money. I was angry about the years. The years I'd spent thinking I was the problem when I struggled to keep up. The years I let them decide what I owed them, what I should sacrifice, what I should give up. I realized this wasn't just a one-time theft. It was a pattern, stretching, back as long as I could remember. And the worst part, I'd let it happen. I'd told myself family comes first, that I was doing the right thing, that eventually they'd appreciate me. But standing there in that empty house, staring at my grandmother's tired face, I saw the truth. I wasn't just their son, I was their resource. That night, after Grandma went to bed, I sat alone in the living room staring at the blinking lights on the half-decorated Christmas tree. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made for my family, paying off credit cards when they forgot, to helping with rent when they overspent, giving up weekends to babysit or fix things around the house. I always told myself it was just part of being a good son, a good brother. But now, with the truth laid bare in front of me, I saw all those moments for what they really were. Not love, not family, but exploitation. And the worst part, I had let it slide over and over because I was too scared to rock the boat. Grandma came back into the room quietly, holding 2 mugs of tea. She sat beside me without saying anything at first, just letting the silence settle. Then she placed her hand on mine and gave me a gentle squeeze. "You've always been the one they leaned on," she said softly, "but they never once stopped to think about what you need." I felt a lump rise in my throat. Grandma had always been sharp, always watching, even when no one thought she noticed. She admitted that she too had been pushed aside, expected to give, never to ask. I realized we were both sitting in the wreckage of years of small, quiet betrayals. I sat there thinking about all the times I'd brushed aside my own needs, telling myself it wasn't that important, when I skipped medical treatments to save money, when I worked extra shifts while they went on vacations, when I put off my own dreams because someone else needed me more. It hit me hard. They had built their comfort on my sacrifices, and I was tired. I told Grandma I was going to gather every bit of proof I could, Bank records, messages, receipts, anything. That showed the pattern. She nodded, her eyes sharper than I'd seen in years. "I'll help you," she said. "It's time they answered this." For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. Not because I knew how it would end, but because for once I wasn't going to face it alone. Grandma leaned over and told me something I'll never forget. "They think you're weak because you've been kind. Show them they were wrong." That night I made a plan. I wasn't just going to ask for my money back. I was going to expose everything they'd taken from both of us and make sure they couldn't keep doing this to anyone else. The next morning, I woke up early, fueled by a restless mix of anger and determination. Grandma was already up, sorting through old bills and folders at the kitchen table. We didn't need to say much. We both knew what we were doing. We started pulling out every scrap of financial paper we could find. I logged into old bank accounts, credit card statements, payment apps. The more we looked, the more the pattern revealed itself. There were dozens of little withdrawals, transfers, charges that I hadn't even questioned at the time. Birthday gifts that somehow became group expenses, family emergencies that I covered alone, shared bills that were never really shared. It all added up to a shocking picture. At first I felt overwhelmed. I didn't know where to start. But then Grandma surprised me. She pulled out a worn notebook she'd kept over the years, tracking small loans she'd given my parents, little favors they'd promised to repay but never did. She'd written it all down, quietly, without complaint, waiting for the day she might need it. That was when I realized this wasn't just about me. It was about both of us, maybe even more. Together we began organizing everything. I made spreadsheets of every transaction I could trace, matched it to dates, compared it to the trips they took, the purchases they flaunted. I dug through emails, text messages, anything that showed the conversations around these family needs. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. They had been treating me and Grandma like personal ATMs. And the more we gathered, the stronger I felt. This wasn't just about confronting them with vague accusations. I was going to walk into that conversation armed with facts, dates, numbers, screenshots, receipts, but I also knew I needed backup. I reached out to a friend who worked in legal services, asking what steps I could take if things got ugly. I wasn't looking for a fight, but I wanted to be ready. My friend gave me advice on documenting everything, making sure the evidence was clear, and drafting a formal repayment demand. I also started quietly preparing for public exposure, drafting a post for social media just in case, outlining the story without naming names, but making the message unmistakable. By the time Christmas was over, I had built a solid case. It wasn't just emotional hurt, it was provable financial exploitation. I felt nervous, but more than anything, I felt clear. I was no longer just a passive victim. I had taken the first steps toward reclaiming control. Grandma looked at me that night and said, "No matter what happens, I'm proud of you." And for the first time in years, I believed it. When they came home, the house exploded with noise. Laughter, bags being dropped, stories about the cruise spilling out in rapid fire. They didn't even notice Grandma and me sitting there at first. I watched them, feeling strangely calm. I'd pictured this moment so many times. Would I scream? Cry, fall apart? But no, I was steady, almost cold. When my mom finally noticed me, she gave me that fake bright smile and said, "Oh, honey, you're here. We brought you something from the islands." She held up a cheap-looking souvenir like that would cover it. I stood up slowly and said, "We need to talk." At first, they laughed it off, telling me to relax, sit down, join them. But when I pulled out the folders, the spreadsheets, the screenshots, the room shifted. I told them calmly, directly, that I knew about the $8,500 loan. And not just that, but every bit of money they'd taken over the years. I laid it all out. The dates, the amounts, the promises they never kept. My dad tried to brush it off. As family helping family. My sister rolled her eyes, muttering about how dramatic I was being. My brother smirked, arms crossed, ready to dismiss me. But I didn't back down. I told them this wasn't just about feelings, it was about facts, and the facts were clear. They had exploited me, and they had exploited Grandma. I handed them The formal letter I'd drafted, laying out exactly what I was demanding. Repayment in full within 48 hours, or I would pursue legal action and go public. My mum's face turned red, flickering between anger and embarrassment. My dad tried to joke, asking if I'd been watching too many courtroom dramas, but I stayed firm. I told them I had spoken to a lawyer, that I was fully prepared to file reports, and that if they thought I was bluffing, they were welcome to test me. Grandma sat beside me, quiet but strong, her presence anchoring me. What struck me most was how quickly their mood turned. At first they were smug, sure they could talk me down, guilt me, laugh it off, but as they realized I wasn't backing down, the panic started creeping in. They tried to shift blame, accuse me of being ungrateful, and remind me of everything they'd done for me over the years. But for once I didn't let their words twist me up inside. I kept coming back to the numbers, the facts, the proof. And eventually they saw it too. They weren't going to win this one. I ended the conversation by saying, "You have 48 hours. After that, I go public." And then I walked away, leaving them sitting there for once without the last word. The next 2 days were some of the longest of my life. At first I waited, hoping maybe they'd take the ultimatum seriously. But instead, I got texts from my brother calling me selfish, my sister telling me I was tearing the family apart, and my parents insisting we could talk this out. No mention of paying back a cent. They mocked the idea that I'd go public, or take legal steps, acting like I was bluffing, like I was just throwing a tantrum I'd eventually get over. But what they didn't understand was that this time I wasn't backing down. So I moved to the next step. I filed formal complaints with the relevant agencies, documented every piece of evidence, and made sure the paper trail was clear. I sent a final email laying out exactly what I was doing, giving them one last chance to settle quietly. When they still didn't respond, I posted a carefully written summary of the situation on social media. No names, no direct accusations, but enough that people close to us would understand. It spread faster than I expected. Friends, extended. Family, even old neighbors started reaching out, asking if what they were hearing was true. Suddenly, the family's carefully crafted image of unity and success began to crack. Within hours, I got a furious call from my mother, demanding that I take the post down, accusing me of humiliating them. My brother left a string of angry voicemails threatening to cut me off for good. But here's the thing. You can't threaten to cut off someone you've already drained dry. I let the messages pile up and kept moving forward. I reached out to a reporter who'd covered local financial scams before, offering to share my story anonymously if needed. I wasn't doing this out of spite. I just wanted accountability, and the more they resisted, the more determined I became to make sure they faced consequences. By the end of the second day, I could tell the pressure was getting to them. The calls turned from angry to anxious, the texts from mocking to pleading. They wanted to make it go away quietly, suddenly realizing I wasn't bluffing. I stood firm. They had 48 hours, and the clock was almost up. When the deadline hit, something shifted. My parents called, their voices shaking. They were ready to talk, really talk this time, not just brush things aside. They offered to repay part of the money, trying to frame it like they were doing me a favor, but I stood my ground. I told them full repayment wasn't negotiable. Slowly, reluctantly, they began wiring the funds back. It wasn't just the $8,500 from the dental loan. I made sure they understood I was demanding everything they'd taken over the years, all the little debts they thought I'd forgotten. Watching the repayments come through piece by piece was both surreal and exhausting. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming what was rightfully mine and Grandma's. But the fallout didn't stop there. Samantha, my sister, worked at a company that prided itself on family values and clean ethics. When word spread about what she'd been part of, she was called in for a meeting. She lost her job within the week. My brother, Brian, faced his own unraveling. His wife, Rachel, who had been mostly silent through all of this, started asking questions. She saw the evidence, the spreadsheets, the receipts. And for the first time, she began to see the side of Brian that I had known all along. Within a month, their marriage was on the rocks, and financial cracks began showing everywhere. My parents weren't immune either. Their friends and neighbors, the people they'd always tried to impress, started pulling away. The carefully polished image they'd built over the years of a happy, successful family was crumbling. I didn't take joy in watching them stumble, but I also didn't step in to soften the blow. They needed to face the consequences of what they'd done. They needed to understand that this wasn't just some family squabble. This was the result of years of lies, exploitation, and betrayal finally coming home to roost. What surprised me most was how quickly the shift happened. Once the truth was out, people began sharing their own stories, little moments they'd noticed over the years, things that hadn't added up, but they'd stayed quiet about. I realized that my family's behavior hadn't just hurt me, it had rippled out, affecting people around us, leaving small scars I'd never seen before. And for the first time, I felt a sense of release. This wasn't just about getting money back, it was about breaking the story open, pulling the mask off, and letting the truth finally breathe. Once the dust settled, I finally had the money to take care of the things I'd put off for so long. The first thing I did was schedule my dental surgery, the one I was supposed to pay for with that stolen loan. Sitting in the chair, knowing I was paying for it with my own reclaimed funds, felt like closing a painful chapter. It wasn't just about fixing my teeth. It was about restoring a part of myself I'd let fall apart under the weight of everyone else's needs. I walked out of that clinic with a deep sense of relief, knowing I was finally investing in my own well-being. But the real victory came with Grandma. With the money we recovered, I was able to upgrade her care, better medications, regular appointments, things she had quietly gone without for years. We started looking for a small, peaceful place of our own, somewhere away from the tension and the noise. Eventually, we found it, a modest little house with a sunny porch where she could sit and knit, where I could study, work, and finally breathe. Moving day felt surreal. As we unpacked, I realized just how much space we had reclaimed, not just physically but emotionally. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by what my family demanded of me. I wasn't the fixer, the helper, the one who smoothed everything over. I was just me, someone who had survived betrayal, stood up for himself, and come out stronger on the other side. I spent quiet evenings with Grandma, sharing stories, laughing over memories, and realizing how much love can exist in just two people when that love is real and mutual. We didn't need a big family gathering or flashy holidays. We just needed peace, respect, and the chance to live without fear of being used. Looking back, I realized I hadn't just reclaimed money, I had reclaimed my identity. I had drawn a line, set a boundary, and said, "This far, no further." And in doing that, I found not just justice, but healing. What I didn't expect was how many people reached out after hearing what had happened. Old friends, acquaintances, even people I barely knew sent messages saying, "I've been through something like this too." They shared their own stories of family manipulation, of being drained emotionally and financially, of feeling trapped by the idea that family loyalty meant never standing up for yourself. I realized that what had happened to me wasn't unique. It was part of a much bigger, often hidden pattern, and by speaking up I had cracked open a space where others could speak too. I started getting involved in small community groups, helping people understand their rights, sharing resources, and just listening when they needed someone to hear them without judgment. It wasn't about becoming a hero or a public figure. It was about making sure the cycle didn't keep repeating, for me or for anyone else who needed that push to break free. Every time someone told me, "Your story gave me the courage to set a boundary," I felt the weight of what I'd gone through shift into something meaningful. In the end, this wasn't just about reclaiming money or exposing lies. It was about realizing that love without respect isn't real love, that loyalty without boundaries is just control, and that sometimes walking away is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. I learned that a true family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's defined by who stands beside you when it matters, who respects your worth, and who doesn't see you as just a resource to be mined. So if you've ever felt trapped by the idea that you owe loyalty to people who hurt you, hear this. You don't. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve to live your life on your own terms, free from the weight of toxic expectations. If this story resonates with you, if it makes you rethink your own boundaries, then I hope you take this as permission to step into your own power. Thank you for listening. And if this helped you in any way, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that remind us we are stronger than the roles we were forced into.